Hello. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. So, how are you today?
It is still breakfast.
Yeah. All right.
Good.
Good. Yeah. So, I got a number of things today to talk about. Once again, we had our DevoWar meeting last week, and Hough went over a lot of the stuff he did with graph neural networks last year, and he's also been working on it since. So he gave some updates on that. So that was good. And we still haven't had any other meetings. We still haven't picked up our cybernetics meetings yet, but we'll be doing that when we can. So wanted to start by mentioning that the Google Summer of Code projects for 2025 are up on Neurostars. We have Project 4, which is the OpenWorm Devo Graph project. So this is where it's sponsored by OpenWorm and our DevoWorm group. And this is the Graph Neural Networks project for biology. This is an advanced skill. So, they have the sort of outline now where you have the skill level, required skills, the description. So it's advanced. We have a repository, which is linked down here. But you also need to have PyTorch TensorFlow workflow experience. You need to be able to work with data sets, such as segmenting video and generating graph visualizations. You need to have the ability to build web interfaces, UI design, a basic knowledge of biology, open source practices, and applied mathematical tools. So these are all kind of the things that, that's not like the extent of the skills, but it's a pretty technical area, doing a lot of machine learning, graph theory, and working with biological data. It's a full-time commitment, so 350 hours, which means it's 40 hours a week for the duration of the summer. And then, this is the description here, where we have this repository DevoGraph, which is we've been working on this for a couple of years. A good number of participants in this repository. We've had GSoC contributors, mentors, and additional contributors, probably numbering about 7 or 8. And so we've been working on this for a couple of years. It's also integrated with our DevoLearn platform, which is a machine learning, deep learning platform for segmenting images and extracting, segmenting cells out of other types of data sets. So this is what we've been building this for a lot longer, but that integrates into the DevoGraph repository, which is here. And, you can take a number of directions on this. We have the Hyper DevoGraph, which was what Hough worked on last year. We also have some topological data analysis and topological graph analysis work that Pocky worked on last year. And so there are a number of ways you can go with this project. The second one is the open source community sustainability. That is also an advanced skill level. And the skills required here, we just really need people who can develop and integrate multiple development environments. For this year, probably some working knowledge of large language models and, some knowledge maybe of agent-based models or some reinforcement learning. So if you have a nice, robust skill set and well-rounded skill set, then you'll be all right. This is 350 hours as well. And, we've been working on this for a while. We worked on these two last year. The LLMOSC, which is the large language model and open source sustainability hybrid model, which is where we had large language models as agents that were living on an agent-based modeling grid, and they were solving tasks and creating projects and doing that sort of thing. We also had multi-agent reinforcement learning last year. We've been doing multi-agent reinforcement learning in the space for a couple of years now. So it's been developing. And so that there are a number of directions you can take this project as well. So that's an update on the Google Summer of Code stuff. Okay, and I'd like to talk about a paper. This paper is Intelligent Soft Matter Towards Embodied Intelligence. Basically, this paper is, and the abstract reads, Intelligent Soft Matter stands at the intersection of material science, physics, and cognitive science, promising to change how we design and interact with materials. This transformative field seeks to create materials that possess lifelike capabilities, such as perception, learning, memory, and adaptive behavior. Unlike traditional materials, which typically perform static or predefined functions, intelligent soft matter dynamically interacts with its environment. It integrates multiple sensory inputs, retains experiences, and makes decisions to optimize its responses. Inspired by biological systems, these materials intend to leverage the inherent properties of soft matter. And those are flexibility, self-evolving or self-evolution, and responsiveness to perform functions that mimic cognitive processes. By synthesizing current research trends and projecting their own evolution, we present a forward-looking perspective on how intelligent soft matter could be constructed with the aim of inspiring innovations in fields such as biomedical devices, adaptive robotics, and beyond. We highlight new pathways for integrating design of sensing, memory, and action with internal low-power operations, and discuss challenges for practical implementation of materials with intelligent behavior. These approaches outline a path towards more robust, versatile, and scalable materials that can potentially act, compute, and quote-unquote think by their inherent intrinsic material behavior beyond traditional smart technologies, relying on external control. So this is, you may have heard of like smart materials and things like that. And it's kind of moving in that direction. And that's what they're getting at in this paper. So let's go down. This is a new field that's emerging called intelligent soft matter. It aims to develop materials with advanced capabilities, such as perception, memory, learning, and adaptive responses, features traditionally attributed only to living organisms. So this is something that allows us to have a material that autonomously interacts and adapts to its environment through self-learning and adaptive mechanisms using stochasticity of a large number of units. So the material has a number of units and they would be able to, behave basically like biological units, if that makes sense. The application domains are things like nanoscale robotics, different types of adaptive systems that optimize performance in real time, materials capable of not only sensing but also altering their surroundings, and neuromorphic platforms for material cognition and thermodynamic computing. So this is kind of the application domains for this. While the initial context of ISM is rooted in the quest to mimic biological system complexity and efficiency, such as neurons, and they talk about neurons here in 10 through 13, it may go well beyond mere biomimetics. The ultimate vision encompasses the creation of soft matter agents possessing fully synthetic intelligence, capable of functionalities that may not even have biological analogs. So similar to macro-scale soft robotics, soft matter transitions from passive adaptability towards exhibiting sophisticated levels of material intelligence, characterized by emergent agency and evolving functionalities, responding to environmental cues. So the idea is that you have these cognitive-like behaviors that emerge through these macroscopic demonstrations. So if you're familiar with shape-changing robots or self-healing materials, or at least those concepts, that's what they're getting at. So you have all these small units that configure themselves in different ways, where you have robots that change shape, or materials that can heal themselves. They have a lot of things on applications, specific examples. So the specific examples are things like active liquid crystals, networks of responsive nanoparticles, self-assembling polymers, and dynamic colloidal assemblies such as magnetic droplets. Okay, so this is one of their diagrams here in the paper. Okay, so this is main capabilities of intelligent soft matter. For soft matter systems to exhibit material intelligence, it must possess a minimal level of structural complexity shown in figure 1. So in this figure, we have decision-making, actuation, perception and sensing, and memory and learning. So decision-making is the process of making autonomous decisions based on inputs. Actuation is the capability to perform actions based on internal stimuli. Perception and sensing is the ability to sense and respond to environmental stimuli. And memory and learning is the capacity to retain information and adapt over time. So those are the 4 capabilities in intelligent soft matter. So when they talk about perception and sensing, this is where the matter as a whole and each individual unit must sense its environment, interpret stimuli, and prioritize actions accordingly. So this includes some sort of global response integration, where you need to process multiple types of sensory input, such as pressure, temperature, and chemical gradients, and then synthesize these into a coherent response. So, for example, soft robots that utilize continuous fluid flow for integrated control can process multiple sensory inputs and give an appropriate response. And they call these flow bots because they can achieve robust control without moving parts and exhibit this global response integration. You also need some sort of selective attention mechanism. So this is where the material selectively responds to certain stimuli while filtering out irrelevant signals and then prioritizing those relevant signals over noise, focusing on significant changes in the environment. So materials that can learn mechanical behaviors by tuning their stiffness is what we want, and this is similar to how artificial neural networks adjust weights. So the ability to learn multiple behaviors simultaneously suggests a form of selective attention, and where the material prioritizes relevant stimuli to provide an adaptive response. Third is dynamic sensory actuator coupling. And so this is where you have this dynamic coupling between sensory and actuator components via feedback loops. For example, a gel-like material exhibits significant stiffness changes in response to thermal stimuli, showcasing how dynamic coupling can enable adaptive behavior in soft materials. This allows for continuous monitoring of environmental interactions and iterative adjustment of actuation, allowing the material to dynamically modulate its response based on observed outcomes. So number 1 is perception and sensing. Then we have memory and learning, which is this section. For soft matter to exhibit cognitive functions beyond reactive behaviors, it must possess a physical memory and be capable of memory and learning. This allows the material to retain information about the past and adapt to future responses. So we need some sort of memory encoding and recall. We need predictive modeling through self-regulation. We need self-repair and learning. And we need adaptive pattern recognition. So this is where, these are things that, of course, we know from a lot of the AI stuff we've talked about and some of the biological systems. Memory encoding and recall is particularly interesting because we already have materials that do that, but this idea that we can have a more sophisticated form of that mechanism is intriguing. So materials could employ phase change elements or deformation-based memory systems to store and recall specific states. Hydrogels can retain and forget information based on thermal stimulation, showcasing how soft materials can encode and retrieve information based on past interactions. A thermomechanical local probe technique has achieved ultra-high storage density in thin polymer films, allowing data storage, retrieval, and erasure. You also have memory and entropy generation and non-equilibrated polymers, where polymer chain conformations, stochasticity, and fluctuations retain historical information that impacts their current behavior. So this is all, sort of stuff that we have now, but we're just improving upon it. Predictive models are important as well. This allows for your material to adjust preemptively to maintain stability and resilience. There are these self-repair mechanisms that allow material to mend itself and develop resistance to recurring stressors, effectively learning from repeated exposure. And then adaptive pattern recognition is where the soft matter can dynamically adjust its behavior or structure to align with predictable environmental cycles. Then we have actuation, of course, because we're dealing with materials that might lead to robotic systems. And so this approach enables adaptive and self-regulating behaviors that fundamentally differ from existing implementations. So the first of these is soft robotic actuation. Current soft robotic actuators, while offering unprecedented flexibility and adaptability in shape and movement, often require complex external control systems and high power inputs. Future directions in ISM actuation should minimize dependence on such external controllers. The emphasis should not just be in designing better actuators that perform motion under stimuli and pre-programmed patterns, but in designs that have inherent self-actuating properties via physical and chemical components of a material structure. Then there are these programmable morphological transformations. These are where you have these, today we have these single mode mechanical deformations in responses for basic motions and linear actuator displacements, or volume expansion contraction, and or some sort of stiffness switch. But of course, in this case, what they're advocating for is something greater, which is this greater repertoire of dynamic morphological transformations. So being able to sort of couple these things or respond to multiple modalities of input. Further research directions must therefore seek to engineer materials capable of more sophisticated and controlled shape changes with a wider range of accessible kinematic behaviors that are tunable according to desired complex functional actions by external interventions. So we want to be able to make better use of reversible material transitions, which is what we observe in liquid crystals with electrical optical control or magnetically actuated polymeric systems where the material can deform into multiple shapes in response to external stimuli rather than pre-programmed single input output responses for each input signal. Okay. And we have self-organizing communication pathways and integration into networks. All right, so and now we have this idea of self-organization and how we might characterize material intelligence. And so they have these 4 principles of intelligent soft matter. So these are self-referential evaluation, self-organization, active inference, and emergent activity. So self-referential evaluation is where you can make an internal assessment and have proactive decision making, so the units kind of come to decisions on their own instead of having someone on the outside program it. Self-organization is where you get spontaneous structure formation from units interacting instead of based on external templates. Active inference is where you can adapt to minimizing prediction error and surprise. And then emergent agency is where you have collective decision making and goal-directed behavior. And so they kind of lay these out here. And then, of course, there are these challenges and opportunities of design. And so the challenges of design in intelligent soft matter are durability and stability. So being able to regenerate the material when it's damaged or destroyed, or have some sort of controlled degradation in cases maybe where you use it as a bioscaffold, where you want it to dissolve at a certain rate, but you also want it to be able to be this sort of intelligent material. Complex behaviors and cognitive functions. We have simple mechanisms and higher order functions. So these are the things we talked about with memory, attention, these other types of adaptive behaviors, these emergent behaviors, some with simple mechanisms, some with higher order functions. Material complexity, where we have stochasticity and experimental paradigms. So stochasticity is where you get this sort of random behavior. And if all of the units have this sort of stochastic behavior, it can make it hard to control, but it also can provide the opportunity for emergence or other complex behaviors. Integration complexity is interoperability, material integrity, basically being able to plug and play this material into any system you want. Scalability is where you have fabrication methods and functional integrity. So, being able to build larger structures from the basic design of these different materials. And then energy management, of course, where you can manage the energy usage of the material or manage it within a system. So you have autonomous functioning and energy information trade-offs. All right, so then this is, let's see. Okay, so they have a number of references here. They don't have the titles of the papers, but they have the references down here. So this paper is going to be a perspective in soft matter journal. Okay. All right, so that's a tour of that paper. I guess it's not quite in an issue yet, but that looks interesting. Yeah. So it looks like we have two new people here, Vidhi, Rohira, and Jess. Jess is old hand here, but he's back. So, Vidhi, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Vidhi. I'm second year student in computer science. So this is the first meet that I'm attending for INCF. I've actually seen this project like idea number 5 sometime back, and I've worked on reinforcement learning previously, so I was interested in contributing.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's something that we just actually talked about before you came into the meeting. So we have our descriptions of the Google Summer of Code projects on Neurostars, which is INCF's platform for advertising the projects. And we have a repository in our GitHub, our ORL group GitHub. And so we have the Google Summer of Code repository there. And we have the multi-agent reinforcement learning directory, which is, I don't know if it's an actual standalone repository, but we've been working on multi-agent reinforcement learning for several years. And yeah, welcome aboard. And we have our Slack. If you're in our Slack, please ask questions there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've joined the Slack, but I don't think anyone has messaged anything. Like there are two channels, general and random. But I think general is more about where people have shared something, but random, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. General, you would join the general channel and just introduce yourself.
Yeah. I'll introduce myself in the general one.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. But nobody has done that like before me. So is it alright?
Oh,
Yeah, I don't think anyone has.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't checked it in like a day or so. So
Yeah.
A lot of the activity is in other channels.
yeah, we usually use the random channel sparingly. So it's we just kind of use it for like advertising meeting, the weekly meeting, and things like that.
Okay. That's nice. So if I want to contribute to this project this year, like in 2025, how should I go about? Like there are 3 prerequisites as far as I'm aware. The first one was to attend the meets, and the other 2 are just to understand the code base, right?
Yeah. So we have a couple of iterations of reinforcement learning, and they're on the GitHub repository. And yeah, I mean, attending the meets is useful for seeing what's going on in the lab. We also have open source meetings, which will happen closer to the summer, where we'll kind of have topics in open source, talk about some of the projects, and so on and so forth. But if you have questions about what's in the repositories or questions about what we do with reinforcement learning, please get in touch through the Slack. Just say like that what you're interested in, and I or someone else can point you in the right direction. So we don't. I mean, we have, I guess, a paper on it, but it's not. It doesn't focus just on reinforcement.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Jesse. Welcome back. I know you had taken a hiatus.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm just stopping in today and kind of easing into more normal functioning again. But it's good to be here, and I didn't get to see what was discussed earlier in the meeting, but yeah, let's in normal terms or regular terms, there's things coming up. There's the NICWIC is happening soon. There's a panel for that. We were accepted to We Robot stuff, which I'm just getting time to really flesh out what now. I think meta science stuff has happened too. Embodied intelligence is coming up soon, and I think it's going to be basically like last year, where you just sort of register and have a talk if you want. There's a bunch of other like conferences and events that are sprouting as well, and I am slowly reorganizing myself to focus on different parts of them at different times. I'm still not really going to be at 100% until a few more weeks when I want to finish my coursework. I'm in my last part of my program, so I won't be doing quite as much, but there'll be a lot of things to talk about, and even in terms of there's things that have kind of come up over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months even, that I would like to talk more about here. Things in my coursework that have been really interesting. And kind of dovetail on some projects here, but between that and JoPro and some other stuff, things are kind of rolling along. but I don't have any major updates right now outside of mentioning those things. But if there's anything, like you might have questions about NICWIC or something like that, but anything you want me to try to speak to, I can do that. But otherwise, it's kind of just a soft restart right now for being back here.
Well, yeah, thank you for um, giving us that update. And yeah, I think the conferences, we have to keep on top of those. Yeah, I haven't heard much about NICWIC and We Robot yet. That's where I've been hands off. But Metascience, I submitted a Metascience abstract a couple weeks ago for the group. We talked about it in the Slack. And that is on project ops or research ops, something like that. I can't remember the title at the moment, but it's basically kind of going over that in the context of reproducibility of metascience. And then the EI workshop, I submitted an abstract for that. That's something maybe that other people might be interested in submitting an abstract to. So you can submit your own abstract if you register. The thing I submitted was basically a continuation of our work on the developmental neurosimulation stuff. So it's just kind of continuing down that road. And I haven't gotten I have some slides on it, but it's still pretty formative. So yeah, we'll have that. We just want to keep our eye on I guess all of those have been submitted. I'm not sure if the Metascience one has been accepted. I don't know when the acceptances are sent out for that. But EI workshop, of course, is just accepted. And then I guess the We Robot we have a formal acceptance for, and NICWIC we have a formal acceptance for.
Yeah. It's interesting because NICWIC kind of became, I don't even know if I got an acceptance for it, but it just became, it's almost like it sort of just became it's happening, but it kind of became absorbed by like the main program. Like it's like a program thing, not like that I submitted it is sort of like, I don't want to say irrelevant, but the latest on that is basically they're trying to center as much as possible. Like I'm curious how to incorporate you and potentially Morgan if you want to, or the people here in the lab, because what they're trying to do, and rightfully so, is center people that can be there in person and also especially like um, like I don't know. I don't really know if I want to say like early career, but like people who are early career and can make it and attend in person. Because I was originally wasn't sure if it was going to be a big virtual thing or not. So I've actually reached out to 2 people that have worked with the lab before that may be able to do it. One of them is Min, and she did a very she contributed to one of our like group NICWIC things a few years ago. And also Samantha Carullo, who actually works with GE now and is, I think, somewhere in New York State. And she's interested in coming to be on the panel. And she's done a lot. She's done stuff with us. She works in some, I think, in the innovation space for GE too. So hopefully those 2 will be able to be on the panel in person. And maybe also Jen, but we'll see from other things here in the lab. But those are kind of like them plus maybe another person might form like the core of the in-person panel. But in terms of other things, like I'm not like I wonder. I'm trying to figure out that if there would be like, you know, maybe kind of like if you could, depending on how much anybody wants to be involved, and I kind of included you, Bradley, in it by default, and you don't have to necessarily, but if you wanted to contribute to the panel, it could be like a small recording, and then maybe a potential virtual like question and answer session as part of the panel too. You won't have to like be, like the main speaker at the panel or anything like that.
Right.
But kind of fit it like I'm not entirely sure yet what uh like I don't know the room it's going to be in yet and what that room can do technically because we're at a different location this year, which is both a good thing and has some challenges. We usually done it in one town, much more, you know, more upstate, and now we're kind of going to be in the middle of between New York City and upstate, between New York City and Albany or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that room is going to be like internet capable to hold a functional like Jitsi call or something like that. But at the very least, depending on how much you wanted, I don't know what your um, capacity or bandwidth for some of it is going to be. So that's kind of what's on my mind about it so far. But otherwise, I'm going to try to be there and moderate a panel between me and Min and hopefully Sam, maybe a few other people in person. And then I've mentioned there's sort of like you and maybe some other people might want to have a virtualish component, and they're okay with that so far. But we're kind of figuring out logistical details for that.
Okay.
We Robot is a poster acceptance, and I would really love to go there in person. I may have some travel blockages or obstacles that may prevent it, but I really want to. I really, 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 really want to do it. But we'll see if I can.
Where is it being held?
It's in essentially outside of just outside of Detroit into Canada at Windsor College
Oh, okay.
of Law.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's in Canada
Yeah.
proper.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where it will be. And I don't think there's a virtual component to it. They usually don't do a virtual like thing. But the theme, the loose theme for that poster is well, what one of the what I kind of wanted to round out the poster with a set of case studies about essentially. Um, I think the larger scale theme for the poster is essentially around. I don't know. The easiest way to say it is present shock, which is a book that's kind of a spiritual successor to Future Shock. And you guys probably know, but just to say, present shock, Future Shock, sort of this idea from the '70s about technologies arriving, technology is enabling things to come very, very, very fast, and it's not sort of not really being fully processed, not really being fully integrated in this stuff. And so there's sort of this, the future's arriving faster and faster and faster. And Present Shock is a book from a couple of years ago that's saying now it's not even future shock, it's that we almost have this collapse of the you know it's not, present shock isn't spoken about from a cognitive science perspective per se, although it does address it, and it kind of gets at the immense pressures that we have on notifications, on like the attention economy, basically, and also kind of like it deals with things like the collapse of narrativity and how even like TV shows sort of and modes of storytelling have changed in this new environment where it's less about certain classical forms of development of narrative and more about um, understanding the universe that the fictional universe that it's in, and not really about development of you know certain conventional things, but just overall the present shock with the sense of being I think one of the prevalent, and one of the key, there's a number of key terms. One of them's like I think digiphrenia or something like that, or some, I don't forget the proper term, but basically the sense of self being split across multiple areas of focus. It's like being spread too thin, because there's so much immediate attention to be, look at the screen, answer your notifications, you got an email, you got a phone call. There's also, all this stuff happening at once, and it's just the spreading too thin of that, and the sort of temporal incoherency of it, perhaps. And that fits interestingly with all the stuff happening in the world today too, for sure. But so I mentioned this in the present shock sense, and what I was kind of curious about, and what inspired the poster, is a bit of like commentary on it, what's happening, and then also I'm not really trying to offer like solutions about it per se, but I'm have a number of projects I'm kind of developing in this space, and I probably will talk about them more ahead. But even using like one of the things I wanted to do, kind of in reference to like what's being done about it, is like I was citing one of the case studies I wanted to mention was basically this lab, and maybe also plot twisters as like sort of inherently narrativity focused. But this lab, even in an academic sense, of like was one of the few labs I've been around where we pretty openly talk about philosophy and history of science. Like we talk about how things change over time. We talk like pretty directly about like developmental psychology and developmental biology, right? But also just like that it's sort of baked into some of what we talk about, and how there's a space for it. That's sort of one of the things that I wanted to mention in or allude to in the poster, and I think that's in terms of education and pedagogy and knowledge generation and exposing people to dealing with things in a way where there's a narrativity and a sense of trajectory and development, as opposed to just this massive collapse, is I think an interesting set of things to look at. So that's a brief overview of it, and there'll be more ahead on that too.
That sounds good. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that. Sounds interesting. We talked about feature shock and cognition features at some point. I know we had an arc on that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's a, I don't even know if I'm going to go there fully with what I'm trying to say to that audience, but like also the Norbert Wiener stuff, and a lot of the, I mean, you could say Norbert Wiener is like almost like the precursor, like at least the human use of human beings is kind of a precursor to some of the stuff, like just his perspective on that, and the whole like like I don't know, a lot of the core things in like society, ethics, technology straight up fit that. So we could go like heavy philosophy, which maybe would be good for that audience, or not, and I'm not quite sure yet. But there's a lot of interesting threads here, so it's nice to kind of be back and talk about some of them again.
Yeah, well, yeah, welcome back. Yeah, thank you. Morgan, I don't know if you had anything to say about the previous section. Did you have anything or any updates?
Well, as you can imagine, the intelligent soft matter paper was posted in the active inference Discord.
Oh yeah.
So I guess is it Vitali? I think he might be a active inference fellow.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
And of course, yeah, just reminds me of Michael Levin's levels of matter.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I feel like this is the I forget, didn't Michael have 4 levels? It was like passive, active, or did he have 3? Passive, active, and and then certainly agential, right?
Right.
But I can't remember now if he had a 4th in there. But you know, this it certainly sounds like an agential matter kind of redescription.
Mm-hmm.
And great to see the GSoCs projects posted. This week, let's see, the previous week's been a bit more active inference. I don't think there were actually any. Friston's theoretical neurobiology group didn't meet this week. And let's see, good meetings. Yeah, just a lot of neurotech this week. And I think, yeah, I think there's maybe something relevant there in virtual reality neurotech. But no, I can't think of any. You know, it'll come to me later. I might need to look through the Slacks to see Slack channels to see what might be good to talk about this week, or you know, things that have come up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just, yeah, if you want to look through there and.
Well, it was a good. Sorry, on Tuesday was a good meeting. So, Conscious Tech Collective is a group that meets here, and in a different kind of cooperative space, and it reminded me. I messaged Adam Saffron about it just because it was Tim Hansen speaking, who was one of the Neuralink co-founders, and but he was talking specifically about empathy AI, and it was, you know, he's joined meetings before, so I you know, I think he's probably the person that I think most overlaps with kind of like orthogonal you know, interests, and you know, he's very eclectic. So he was trying to, his talk, I'm not going to do it justice, but it was something like Strange Loops, AI, and empathy, something like that.
Okay.
And I think he was trying to get at some points of Hofstadter's about symbols. Well, like he kept referring to this line from I Am a Strange Loop that like symbols pushing symbols or something like that. And I think he was trying to relate it to, you know, would you when we achieve a point where we can feed a large language model back into itself, and it can start to change its programming to alter how it processes those symbols that it's inputting back onto itself, right?
Yeah.
That would be the Hofstadter's strange live.
Okay.
And that point, I think he was also trying to. I mean, he'd be the first to say that that this was a very kind of like still, not fully baked
Yeah.
talk, right? But that was a general intelligence, or that was the no, sorry, that would be consciousness.
Yeah.
In a like, and what he liked about it, and he was definitely trying to ground it originally with the historical context was Gödel, and then he wanted to say that we now live in this tension between a kind of Wolfram and I don't really know how to pronounce his name right, but it's like Hassabis. What's Denny?
Yeah, Hassabis.
Something. Anyway, DeepMind founder, Nobel Prize winner.
Right. Yeah.
I think we cover, and so I liked that, or like again, like
what is the tension between Wolfram and Hassabis?
Well, sorry, not the tension. I actually had a problem with the. He was like, Wolfram is always pushing this computational irreducibility, and Demi's is saying that, like, hey, we can basically approximate reality.
Oh, okay.
And I was just like, no, that's not that's not attention.
Yeah.
like Wolfram, I was just like, hey, you can't skip Chaitin and jump to Wolfram and then be like, what's Wolfram talking about? Like there is this computational irreducibility.
Right.
It comes out of some really grounded work, and yeah. So algorithmic information theory stands there. What the other side is that, like reality, or certainly, computational physics certainly is very effective. I mean, who wrote the effectiveness of it's like man, I can't remember the title.
Effectiveness in mathematics.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't remember who wrote that, but I know that. Yeah, it's a classic.
But
work.
This is classic, right? And there is this that, if you will, is the other side, right? Is that, like, mathematics is remarkably effective, but I think it would be the same, like, it's not trying the computational mathematics in the form that DeepMind is using to try and solve fusion problems and things like that is not trying to address the issues that Gödel and Chaitin are trying to address, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, there's if anything, you're getting closer to Hoffman in terms of just the algorithms start to push the limit of what our understanding of space-time and things like that, and that anyway, but I liked the loop in terms of just coming up with a computational way that you could perhaps redescribe something like consciousness, right? Where it's this symbols pushing symbols. Like again, like I think he was trying to open up that large language models could achieve something that was kind of universally computational, without it becoming, without it developing soul,
Right.
or something like that, right? And so that was good. And his point was, what he was trying to say, what he was trying to link this to, that I thought was really interesting with regards to Logan Cross, and that group at Stanford, was agentic theories of mind, right?
Right.
So what does it mean for an agent to have a theory of mind? And he was trying to make it where you were able to, again, kind of essentially see your symbols the way somebody else saw them. See these symbols the way somebody else was seeing them, which was kind of like being able to run their code, run their algorithm. And anyway, it was, his end goal was the same as kind of Adam Safron's, which was, how do we get all this technology to be driving us towards, positive, positive goals. And anyway, that was just a nice discussion at a level that didn't, still tried somewhat to stay grounded in algorithms and mathematics.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. And then, Neurotech meeting this week, or the Phil in London, Functional Imaging Lab in London, had a great presentation on from a woman who really pioneered this kind of transcranial focused ultrasound, and that was nice. Elsa, excuse me, I forget her last name. Let's see, it's maybe Italian. Forganon. Okay. Anyway, she's now the director of the BRIC, the Brain Research Imaging Center in Plymouth, and has definitely pioneered a lot of these techniques that are now kind of standard in focused ultrasound groups, which is how to collect, kind of like an MRI data set very quickly that actually tells you something about a person's skull. And she had some good, some really interesting examples that, it's very unusual. Like, she's a biomedical engineer, but I see that she was in Matthew Rushworth's lab at Oxford, which is a very, it's a real decision-making lab, right? So she had examples where she's doing kind of neuromodulation, but in the context of these, kind of well understood primate models. And so was more showing the effects of neuromodulation from behavioral data, as opposed to, trying to, like Stanford's approach of trying to collect this kind of data inside an MRI, where you can actually, literally like visualize the displacement caused by the ultrasound. Hers were much more like, hey, I'm gonna target these subcortical structures that should cause this behavior or decision-making task to change in some bias in some direction. That was very interesting. And sorry, there was one more that I thought of, but now I'm blanking on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll come up later.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's all good stuff. Glad to hear that. Like, you enjoyed the.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
I just remembered. Sorry. So there was an organoid meeting in Boston, and so apologies because the number of kind of organoid slacks has grown, and so most of the organoid stuff I'm doing at Celsius, but we now have an organoid intelligence Slack, right?
Okay.
And this is started together with a guy now. Yeah, that's right. At Elevate Bio in Boston. So, but interestingly, this was I don't know if people follow Kurt Jomungal, but his Theories of Everything podcast. He has some great guests. I really enjoyed the quantum physics talks that he had just recently. As a moderator, when he was in Boston last week, he had Manolis Callis. And Manolis runs the compbio.mit.edu site, and course. His course is online. I've tried to watch videos from it, and so Callis just had a meeting in Boston on organoids and consciousness, and I'll post the video in Brain Organoids.
Okay. Yeah, that would be good.
But it was exciting because Callis joined our Slack.
Okay.
After the meeting. So somebody from the TIFA Society was in Boston for the organoids meeting and had shared the Slack link. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So it's I don't think of the TIFA that is related to the organoid work, but this week there was a connection.
Yeah. TFUS is what? The
transcranial focused ultrasound.
Oh, right. That's it.
Yeah, and although I will say that they've been linked together before, which is in how Open Water Health, which is Mary Lou Jepson's company, that's making these super low cost advanced imaging devices and focused ultrasound devices. She was the one who's doing cancer cell destruction with focused ultrasound and leaving the healthy tissue intact. And she demonstrated that using organoids. So it was brain organoids, glioblastoma, and then showing how you could lyse the cancerous cells. And I think that was a big part of how she was able to raise so much money in the past year. Yeah. So super interesting connection there.
Yeah. So thank you for that. There's interesting stuff. Definitely a lot of good things going on there.
Yeah. I just dropped a link to that talk with Emery Brown. So since Amanda's not here, I'll say Emery Brown is the very famous anesthesiologist that works together. Does a lot of what I would call the really important work in consciousness studies.
Yeah.
Understanding the physiology, and So he's also had a multi-year collaboration together with Earl Miller there, which is a shout out to a meeting next week. Wave Club will be meeting next week, March 4th. So that's the BART, Ermintrout group. It covers traveling waves in neural systems. So Emery Brown, and then Ken Kosick, who I wasn't familiar with before, but is a conscious researcher in Santa Barbara. And so he had a paper that's something like, "Why aren't organoids conscious yet?" And that was so you can find the video, Brain Organoids.
All right, yeah. All right, that's great. I did want to talk about, so we've been going through this arc on large language models and reasoning. We've been posting a lot in the Slack, and the last few meetings we've been talking about this. So I did want to go over some readings that I've kind of collected from the Slack. Well, the first one actually is this article. I think this was posted by Hussein or maybe Morgan. This was on I think it was Zura who posted this. Then this is Google Research. This is their co-scientist that they're working on. And so I guess Zura, right, memory serves, Zura posted and said, "Have you tried this yet?" And I don't think there's actually anything to demo, but they have some papers. So this is a blog post that kind of goes over what Google is doing in this area. So this is accelerating scientific breakthroughs with an AI co-scientist. And they introduced the AI co-scientist, a multi-agent AI system built with Gemini 2.0. Is a virtual scientific collaborator to help scientists generate novel hypotheses and research proposals, and to accelerate the clock speed of scientific and biomedical discoveries, always with the computational analogy. So they have the AI co-scientist paper, the gene transfer discovery paper, and the transfer rediscovery paper. So we'll get into those in a minute. And this just kind of, this is kind of semi-marketing this blog post, but basically, they're trying to empower scientists and accelerate discovery. And so, given a scientist's research goal that has been specified in natural language, the AI co-scientist is designed to generate novel research hypotheses, a detailed research overview, and experimental protocols. To do so, it uses a coalition of specialized agents: generation, reflection, ranking, evolution, proximity, and meta review. So those are the 6 agents, and they're all specialized for these different phases of, research evaluation that are inspired by the scientific method itself. These agents use automated feedback to iteratively generate, evaluate, and refine hypotheses, resulting in a self-improving cycle of increasing high quality and novel outputs. So this is the GIF here. Let me see. Start here with, I guess you can stop it, okay. This is a graph that says test time compute versus research ideas, quality and novelty, so they're going to be plotting that. The scientist here has this set of agents at their disposal. So I guess the scientist is a supervisor agent, or there's a supervisor agent here. And then you have the proximity agent, the meta review agent, ranking agent, the evolution agent, the generation agent, and the review agent. So you have something that generates a hypothesis, something that reviews the hypothesis, something that ranks the hypothesis, something that evolves the hypothesis, and then reviews it at a higher level. And then they do this tournament selection of research ideas. So you put a bunch of research ideas in a list, and you evaluate them. And then you generate this graph here, which is, I don't know what kind of data this is, but it just kind of shows the, the increase in quality, I guess, and novelty. So this is the design here, the co-scientist design. The scientist is here. The scientist interacts with the system by specifying a research goal in natural language. They can also suggest their own ideas and proposals, provide feedback and reviews, and interact via a chat interface to guide the co-scientist system. So this is where the scientist is interacting with the agents. There's an input of a research goal. So the scientist describes a research goal along with preferences, experimental constraints, and other attributes. And then you have these, this goes into this multi-agent system. So there's a plan configuration. There's this ranking agent tournament. So it means that, you have these different rankings of ideas. So research hypothesis comparison and ranking with scientific debate in tournaments. Limitations and top win-loss patterns are summarized and provided as feedback to other agents. This enables iterative improvement in quality of research, hypothesis generation, creating a self-improving loop. So you have the generation agent, the reflection agent, evolution agent, proximity check agent, meta review agent. So the generation agent does literature exploration, simulated scientific debate. The reflection agent does full review with web search, simulation review, tournament review, deep verification. And the evolution agent does inspiration from other ideas, simplification, research extension. Then the meta review agent does research overview formulation. Then comes to this output, which is research proposals and overview. Top-ranked research hypotheses and proposals are summarized into a research overview and shared with the scientist. So that's the co-scientist design system. So I don't know if they're not trying to be like an AI scientist so much as a sort of an extension of the scientist. So you can actually, put in ideas, put in hypotheses, and then there's this evaluation by the co-scientist, and it spits out some sort of proposal and overview structure. So then this is kind of some performance information here. Why don't we go up to these papers here? The AI co-scientist paper. This is towards an AI co-scientist. This is a technical paper, and let's look at the abstract. Scientific discovery relies on scientists generating novel hypotheses. To augment this process, we introduced the AI co-scientist, a multi-agent system built on Gemini 2.0. So they're using Gemini 2.0 for this, and they're using these different agents within that framework. The AI co-scientist is intended to help uncover new, original knowledge and to formulate demonstrably novel research hypotheses and proposals, building upon prior evidence and aligned to scientist-provided research objectives and guidance. The system's design incorporates a generate, debate, and involve approach to hypothesis generation. So this is where they have the evolution and the evaluation. So you generate hypotheses, you debate them, you rank them, you have this tournament, and then you evolve them over time. So this is inspired by the scientific method and accelerated by scaling test time compute. Key contributions include 1, a multi-agent architecture with an asynchronous task execution framework for flexible compute scaling. 2, a tournament evolution process for self-improving hypothesis generation, and then automated evaluations show continued benefit of test time compute, improving hypothesis quality. So they actually implement this and validate this in 3 biomedical areas: drug repurposing, novel target discovery, and explaining mechanisms of bacterial evolution and antimicrobial resistance. For drug repurposing, the system proposes candidates with promising validation findings, including candidates for acute myeloid leukemia that show tumor inhibition in vitro at clinically applicable concentrations. For novel target discovery, the AI co-scientists proposed new epigenetic targets for liver fibrosis validated by anti-fibrotic activity in liver cell regeneration in human hepatic organoids. Finally, the AI co-scientists recapitulated unpublished experimental results via parallel in silico discovery of a novel gene transfer mechanism in bacterial evolution. These results, detailed in separate co-timed reports, demonstrate the potential to augment biomedical and scientific discovery and usher an era of AI-empowered scientists. So this kind of goes through this. This is the AI co-scientist paper. And then they did this gene transfer discovery paper, which is on the bioRxiv. This is chimeric infective particles expand species boundaries in phage-inducible chromosomal island mobilization. So this is a very specific paper in, I guess it's in looking at mobile genetic elements. So this is, I guess this is applying this methodology to a study. And then this other one, transfer rediscovery, which is this paper here. AI mirrors experimental science to uncover a novel mechanism of gene transfer crucial to bacterial evolution. This paper utilizes the platform as well. So let's look at this paper. The summary: AI models have been proposed for hypothesis generation, but testing their ability to drive high-impact research is challenging since an AI-generated hypothesis can take decades to validate. Here we challenge the ability of a recently developed large language model platform, AI co-scientist, to generate high-level hypotheses by posing a question that took years to resolve experimentally but remains unpublished. And that is, how could capsid-forming phage-inducible chromosomal islands, so this is from the last paper, kind of summarizing the AI contribution here, spread across bacterial species. So, remarkably, AI co-scientists' top-ranked hypotheses matched our experimentally confirmed mechanism. That is, CF PICIs hijack diverse phage tails to expand their host range. We critically assess its 5 highest-ranked hypotheses, showing that some open new research avenues in our laboratory. We benchmarked its performance against other large language models and outlined best practices for integrating AI into scientific discovery. Our findings suggest that AI cannot just act as a tool, but as a creative engine, accelerating discovery and reshaping how we generate and test scientific hypotheses. Okay, so this is a paper on, so the second paper was on this topic of phage-inducible chromosomal islands, and this paper focuses on the AI contribution to that. Okay, so that's something about doing co-scientist work. So there are a couple papers on AI science, like an AI scientist concept. There's another paper that kind of critiques the whole area of AI having an AI scientist. I don't have that paper here. I don't know if we covered that in a previous meeting, but and then this is the co-scientist, where you're actually using it as a sort of a cognitive support tool. This is something I think that Morgan posted in the Slack. So this is the Frames of Mind GitHub repository. This is animating R1's thoughts. So this is the R1 large language model. And this is kind of talking about some of the things that they're doing here. The thought process for R1. So this is kind of the repository where you can clone the repository and run this environment. And so they want to visualize the thought process of R1. So we can visualize the thought process of R1 by saving the chains of thought as text, converting the text to embeddings with the OpenAI API, and then plotting the embeddings sequentially with t-SNE. So they're using the t-SNE method to visualize the results of the embeddings. So this is where we're taking these chains of thought as text, converting the text to an embedding, and then plotting the embeddings of visualization. And so Here's what it looks like when R1 answers a question. In this case, describe how a bicycle works. So you have this prompt, describe how a bicycle works. And then you have, so this is going to be, I guess, in sequence here. Okay, so I need to describe how a bicycle works. Let me start by thinking about the basic components of a bicycle. There's the frame, wheels, pedals, chain, handlebars, brakes, and gears. How do all these parts work together to make the bike move? And so this is where you start with this point here. You have consecutive distance. It might be useful to get a sense of how big each jump from thought I to thought I plus 1 is. Then this graph would show the difference between consecutive steps. So this is consecutive cosine distances, transition number versus normalized cosine distance. Then by default, we calculate cosine similarity between the embeddings and normalize across the set of all consecutive steps to 0, 1. So over that interval. I'm interested in seeing when the bigger or smaller jumps happen in the thought cycle. So then there's this combined plot where you have, it kind of goes through the problem. And then you get these aggregated distances, which is the position in percent versus the value. So this is a normalized sequence analysis. You get these individual sequences, which are highly variable, but then you can find the mean sequence, or right here in blue, which averages across all of these sequences. And so I don't know how useful the average sequence is, but you get this smooth version of the thoughts. And so the graph above shows the aggregated distances for 10 samples. To my eyes, it looks like a search phase where the size of the step is large, followed by a stable thinking phase, followed by a concluding phase. So you have the search, thinking, and concluding. I guess this is the search, this is the thinking, this is the concluding. Okay, so that's this repository here, frames of mind. And then finally, this paper here, this is from Trends in Cognitive Science. This is a featured review. I think this was also in the Slack. And this is structures, not strings. Linguistics is part of the cognitive sciences. So this is where they talk about linguistics and the cognitive sciences and kind of how that sort of, in these kind of generative grammars and how that's fitting together. So this is a little bit different. This isn't focused on large language models, but it does talk about how we think about language and cognitive science. So Chomsky is on this, and a number of other people. So there are many questions one can ask about the human language, its distinctive properties, neural representation, characteristic uses including use in communicative contexts, variation, growth in the individual, and origin. Every such inquiry is guided by some concept of what language is. Sharpening the core question, what is language, and paying close attention to the basic property of the language faculty and its biological foundations makes it clear how linguistics is firmly positioned within the cognitive sciences. Here we will show recent developments in generative grammar. Taking language as a computational cognitive mechanism seriously allows us to address issues of unexplained in the increasingly popular surface-oriented approaches to language. So they have this trends box here on the right, which is, of course, because it's trends in cognitive science, it's sort of describes the trend here. The computations of the mind rely on the structural organization of phrases, but are blind to the linear organization of words that are articulated and perceived by input and output systems at the sensory motor interface. And this is where we generate speech and we produce signs. The computational procedure that is universally adopted is computationally much more complex than an alternative that relies on linear order. Linear order is not available to the systems of syntax and semantics. It is an ancillary feature of language, probably a reflex of properties of the sensory motor system that requires it for externalization and constrained by conditions imposed by sensory motor modalities. it follows that language is primarily an instrument for the expression of thought. Language is neither speech/sign, externalized expression, nor communication, one of its many possible uses. So this paper goes through, so there's box 1, which is the basic property of language, talking about how you use merges. There's also this study of language, which focuses on 3 questions. We have this glossary, which has a number of terms that we use in the study of language. Let's see. Talking about syntax and the syntax of semantics, talking about simple rules in language, showing sort of this idea of negative polarity. So this is, I think, a valuable article for thinking about how people study language, and then going back to this Frames of Mind repository, where they kind of go through animating the thoughts of a large language model, and then the co-scientist model, which gives us this way of thinking about human constructs of language and descriptions of things that are more abstract ideas, things like that. Okay, let me see what we have in the chat here. So Jess has made a couple of comments here. Mentioned the GSoC channel. We have a GSoC channel on our Slack. So going back to that part of the meeting, yeah, we have that. You should join the GSoC channel if you're interested in Google Summer of Code. There's this Blue Sky post, and this is the empathy reference to the empathy AI thing, which is where, okay, Daryl Cameron says, apparently one of my papers on AI empathy with this person here was put up as an example in a talk at SPSP. Yet it's one in which we use interdisciplinary dialogue between psychology and philosophy to take an open-minded, broad view on empathy, exploring cost benefits across modes. Alas, I don't really know what the context for that is, but maybe this was in the Society for.
I think you put it up as like, was this real? Was this what Tim was talking about? Tim Hansen.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And Adam Safran, because they both talk about empathy as it relates to artificial intelligence. But
okay,
yeah, I'll check that out. I was just going to say that some of the papers that you're covering you can find in Cognition Futures channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and or data sci ML.
Yeah.
It's perhaps in Dev Neuro AI. I haven't tracked down them. Oh yeah. Well,
yeah. Well,
there's Dev has between circuits and Chomsky pre-training on formal languages and parts linguistic biases.
Okay. We can go back. We can go back to those channels in a little bit.
Here. Yeah, no, it's but that is kind of yeah.
All right.
There's a lot of channels there. Vidal, is it Vidal? Vidhi?
Is that?
Sorry, I can't.
Oh yeah, Vidhi.
I can't read Vidhi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got my glasses on. I still can't read.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So this post I just talked about was empathy AI. Okay, and then VDS. Yeah, would really be helpful to go through these again. So yeah, the papers. You mean just having access?
Yeah, and they'll be in the YouTube video description.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll go through the channels again, and the papers will be in there, and we can also, yeah. We get, we always I go through the papers kind of quickly, and it's always useful to follow up on some of that stuff. But yeah, it's okay. So yeah, why don't we go through the channels then? And so the first one here we want to go through is cognition futures. This is the paper structures, not strings. This I'll repost this because this is just the link to it doesn't have the paper in it. Okay, so that's there. Data science ML is this channel. So this is we have speech and language processing here. This is for Web Stanford.
I just dropped in. That's the course material for the NLP at Stanford.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. And then that's a kind of symbols, pushing symbols paper. It's just interesting self-correction. Those are actually all UI UC people.
Oh, okay. This paper.
Yeah.
So this is self-rewarding correction for mathematical reasoning. So this is the idea that you're taking the output of a large language model and you're making it reflect on itself.
And I mean, the reason that this is interesting is that previous attempts to do this have sent models into a downward spiral.
Right. Yeah, that's what people... Like people have talked about that as being like garbage in, garbage out, where you kind of everything is subsumed by a large language model and you train it on a large language model and it becomes kind of like this self-referential mess.
And it becomes a mess and certainly doesn't expand out of its previous capabilities. Right. And this is an example where they're saying that it's as good as at least external reward system, right. which is again impressive, but with the caveat that of course these mathematical reasoning models are still just a very limited domain where we know the reasoning landscape better.
Right.
I'm not sure how best to put that, but yeah.
Well, it looks like they're using some sort of reinforcement learning.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, so they're using reinforcement learning to like smooth over that sort of garbage in, garbage out aspect. And so
right.
It's like you can be recursive, but you have to have some sort of reward structure. And
but it's self-rewarding.
Right, self-rewarding.
So that's interesting, right? Which is which we think we are doing ourselves.
Right. Well, yeah, we're constantly referring to symbols, and sometimes we do this as a way of kind of, it's this garbage in, garbage out thing. Like we kind of have these meanings for symbols that aren't really, they're not good meanings, or they're not like, they can be multiple meanings, and but so I mean, human cognition, we might think of it as a gold standard, but human cognition can produce a lot of sort of self-referential nonsense as well. So it's interesting though how we get into these kind of systems and see how we can model them. That's from data science ML. Then we have ML Gym, and that's this is, of course, we've talked about these in the past, these models where they use this training environment to train models. So this is Meta ML Gym and ML Gym Bench. So this is the first gym environment for machine learning tasks, enabling research and reinforcement learning algorithms for training such agents. ML Gym Bench consists of 13 diverse and open-ended AI research tasks from diverse domains such as computer vision, natural language processing, reinforcement learning, and game theory. Solving these tasks requires real-world AI research skills such as generating new ideas and hypotheses, creating and processing data, implementing ML methods, training models, running experiments, analyzing the results, and iterating through this process to improve on a given task. So they're doing something similar to sort of a AI scientist here. Obviously, that's not what they call it, but it's a sort of like you testing possible ideas about the world and kind of running through those iteratively.
And just again to Modal's, kind of chief scientist, we're only as good as our benchmarks.
Right.
Or our understanding is certainly limited by our benchmarks. Right. And so yeah, this is just one of the latest, trying to keep up with just even the benchmarks.
Right.
is tough. But yeah, like there should be and there are groups that are just making meta benchmarks, of just benchmarks of collections of benchmarks.
Yeah. So they said we evaluate a number of frontier large language models on our benchmarks, such as Claude 3.5, Sonnet, Llama 3.1, 405B, GPT 4.0, O1 Preview, and Gemini 1.5 Pro. When they say frontier large language models, they mean newer and more powerful ones, or what do they mean by that?
Well, I mean, this goes back to our what does foundation model mean? Yeah. I think it does seem like this is their we know it's a moving target.
Okay, yeah.
So this is what Frontier is marketing speak for. The latest release from one of the big companies.
Oh, okay, yeah. So just to keep up with the times.
I mean, this paper is what February 20th. 4.5 is released. Like it's already out of date. And
yeah,
it's like barely a week out. Right?
Yeah. All right, so that's good. So that's in data science ML. We have some other interesting things in here as well. And then let's go to Dev Neuro AI. So this is the paper between Circuits and Chomsky, pre-training on formal languages and parts linguistic biases. This is this is kind of not the paper we're talking about, but what is this paper?
So this is an interesting one where, again, so many of these, right? You start with kind of like all the text on the internet kind of scrape, right? Mm-hmm. But here, everybody's now trying like, let me take one of these foundation models and now fine tune it, or add some training in some special way, right? So there's the emergent misalignment paper where they actually train it on maladaptive code, right?
Yeah.
And it starts behaving in all these sick and demented ways, starts outputting all this kind of racist bile.
Yeah.
And I wanna have that as a pair with this, which is this is trained on all on just formal languages. So that comes more from like linguistics and computer science. Yeah. And again, it somewhat relates back to the deep algebra project, where it's just like, if we really tried to make a math model, in a very general sense, then training on formal languages would be a part of it. You know, it's sort of. I mean, this is somewhat related to the models that try to include theorem solvers.
Yeah.
Right. And anyway, but then again, you know, so this also just reminded me somewhat of the Emily Bender Marcus meeting that had the conference that had a bunch of linguists, you know, linguistics people analyzing large language model output.
Right.
Because in you know, to kind of follow Penrose here, right? Like these, quote again, foundation models is kind of using their marketing speak, right? Just big large language models. When we interact with them, what we're seeing is really artificial cleverness, right?
Right.
It's and what, say, Marcus and Bender would mean by that is like, we're just not equipped to prompt and analyze the model in such a way to reveal its limitations, right? Because we're talking with it like we would somebody we met down in the coffee shop.
Right.
And you know, so just super valuable to remember that particular meeting, because you know, the linguists were pointing out that these subtle yet kind of red flags that they were seeing in these models that those without training wouldn't catch. Here, it's a bit more, you know. Well, again, it's like if you train on these formal languages, what would you expect? So one, what would you expect? Right? If you pretend that you understand what large language models do, right? Or how large language models work, which again, I think, you know, again, I want to have like the emergent misalignment paper as like, do you really understand? You know, or would you, you know, if this was a person, would you think that they were, you know, kind of mentally ill, right? And in the formal language case, it's just like it's subtler, but then you also, you know, so there's some existing benchmark work that suggests that you get improvements, but I think it actually really highlights that we have to do a lot more, a lot finer and a lot more intelligent probing of the systems to actually get at, you know, what have we built here, and yeah, anyway. Okay. Just interesting in that regard, and you know, would want to also pair it with like the theorem solvers and stuff.
Yeah. So this is, of course, pre-training language models on formal languages can improve their acquisition of natural language, but it's unclear which features of the formal language impart an inductive bias that leads to effective transfer. So this draws from linguistics and complexity theory, thinking about, you know, how effective transfer occurs. They hypothesize that effective transfer occurs when the formal language both captures dependency structures in natural language and remains within the computational limits of the model architecture. So they focus on transformers here, and they find that formal languages with both these properties enable language models to achieve lower loss, a natural language and better linguistic generalization compared to other languages. Pre-training or training on formal than natural language reduces loss more efficiently than the same amount of natural language. So I guess they're using formal languages to pre-train or pre-train models, and it can improve the performance in terms of natural language. So for a 1 billion parameter language model trained on roughly 1.6 billion tokens of natural language, pre-training achieves the same loss and better linguistic generalization with a 33% smaller token budget. We also get mechanistic evidence of crosstalk transfer from formal to natural language. Attention heads acquired during formal language pre-training remain crucial for the model's performance on syntactic evaluations. So yeah, and Morgan was talking about how we could pair that with some other findings in large language model research. Yeah, and so we have some other things in here, though this is the intelligent soft matter paper I talked about earlier. Morgan actually originally posted that.
Well, again, it came from active inference.
Yeah. But he put it in here. That's how we got. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, that's yeah. So I don't know if we wanted to talk more about the collection of papers we talked about in this section, or we had any more thoughts about reasoning in large language models or any of that.
Yeah, I'm you know, it's really difficult to assess these, obviously, especially when I think I don't use Google AI Studio, but I think that's where we're supposed to follow this. I put a link in professional dev of, it's the PyMC developer had reposted this, and so I put a link. This developer lead web page, but it's spelled Paige.
Okay.
like her name is Paige.
Yeah.
Okay. I think her Twitter handle is dynamic web page.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. Okay. Anyway, she like I think some of her kind of outreach work is showing people how to use this stuff. So I haven't dived in to see what is accessible with this Gemini 2 and kind of reasoning, but I wonder, like their examples, they're trying to say this is scientists because it's discovered things that these researchers say they hadn't published, right? But that doesn't that perhaps suggests it's not a this isn't just a database retrieval,
right?
Fine. Yeah, it's this isn't really probing the problem though. With it just reminds me somewhat of the Othello GPT from last week, right? Which is like we don't really know how to ask the model about its internal reasoning. In constructive ways that are not. Vidhi, just hit the add button. So say add channel, and then you'll get a browse channel or create channel, and you can just say browse channel, and then you can select those other channels like Dev Neuro AI or Data Sci ML. And okay, cool. So because it's I mean, again, just devil's advocate, right? Like, okay, you hadn't published that, but maybe you guys have been lost in the farce, right? and the model's just like, well, obviously, because it can look across a lot of material, it's just like, yeah, of course you'd put these these 10 things together. Right? like, I mean, again, I'm not saying this is, absolutely the case, because I haven't dived into what their thing is, but I don't know if it's a convincing, like, this obviously was insightful, or no, not insightful. This was obviously imaginative,
right.
Or whatever. What's the right word for what we expect here? And again, there's too much of this kind of vague, like fitting a narrative of what we think science is,
right?
As opposed to yeah. Anyway, but Demi on social media is very, very excited about this, and he does, more so than I think some of the tech leaders. He tries to stay grounded, and certainly is I do know that this has always been his dream, right? Of course, it's been Schmidt-Huber's dream too.
Yeah. I'm sure Schmidt-Huber always has like something to.
when it does work, Schmidt-Huber will be like, "I said this in 1992."
Well, it's nice to see tournament selection being featured prominently.
No. I mean, there was a bunch of things. Well, I hate to mention Schmidt-Huber and then say this, but like, I think we said this before. It was obviously, you're obviously going to need like a hybrid system. It wasn't going to be just like more training.
Right. Yeah.
It'll and I think that, well, this is the fascinating thing about this rise of reasoning models, right? Is that the large language models aren't reasoners.
Right.
You're now trying to build in, it's just like you've got this squawking box, and now you're trying to, get it to do the squawks at the right time, with the right bits, and so a lot of that is actually very different from the supposed like insights of transformer models, right? So yeah. Anyway, I like I said last week, I think we need to have a healthy dose of mystery science, AI, hype theater.
Oh yeah.
To just and like the Emily Bender, the
have you
Marcus? Oh, sorry.
Have you watched are you referencing the actual like the Dares Mystery Science Hype Theater thing? Because I've been meaning to look at that, but I haven't yet. So I don't know if you're actually
so they Twitch next week.
Yeah,
I think they Twitch next week. And yeah, I much like news about politics, like I try to avoid it, but I get inundated in tech hype on a hourly basis. It seems like, right? I mean, like again, like the fact that we call these things foundation and or frontier models, like I'm sorry, that's just that's just working for the matrix.
Yeah.
and yeah. Anyway, so it's just like, yeah, let's just remind ourselves of those criticisms, and that these benchmarks are crude, and yeah. So our reason, and there's this false, yes, I love leaderboards, but there's this false, the leaderboards suggest that there's progress every release, right?
Yeah.
On the metrics, whereas like is it the progress that we actually want and or need? Separate. Well, Father Ted should probably be brought up more too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a friend, Pat Cooney from high school, and I sent him. This is wonderful. I'd never. Alan Partridge. I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Partridge, but the great comedy. Anyway, he's talking to these two Irish in an episode, and I found out later that these two Irish guys are actually the writers of all of these shows, like Father Ted's. Anyway, yeah. I can send you a clip. It's awesome.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good. Let's move on here. Yeah, I think I'll get into this, and I know I've been waiting for Jesse to be here because it's about affordances. So I want to make sure that he's has some way to feedback. I have a collection of things on something called affordance learning. So we're moving from large language models, now we're moving to more of embodiment and affordances. So this is a type of learning called affordance learning. We'll start with this paper here. This is from the arXiv from late 2024. And the title here is Affordance-Centric Policy Learning. This is on robot policy learning and affordance-centric task frames. So let's read the abstract and then move on to the next paper and see if we can piece together what affordance learning is. So they're talking about robotic manipulation. They're talking about embodied robotics. And they say that affordances are central to robotic manipulation, where most tasks can be simplified to interactions with task-specific regions or objects. So again, affordances are basically these things that help a robot or help us interact with the environment. It's like a door handle is an affordance. It gives you information about how to push the door open or to pull it closed. And this is just an example when you'll find affordances, especially in embodied cognition, because affordances, allow you to interact with the world, use your body, and have information that's encoded into the world instead of from some sort of memory. So affordances are central to robotic manipulation, where most tasks can be simplified to interactions. By focusing on these key regions, we can abstract away task-irrelevant information, simplifying the learning process and enhancing generalization. In this paper, we propose an affordance-centric policy learning approach that centers and appropriately orients a task frame on these affordance regions, allowing us to achieve both intra-category invariance, where policies can generalize across different instances within the same object category, and spatial invariance, which enables consistent performance regardless of object placement in the environment. So you have intra-category invariance, where policies can generalize. So this means that you have policies that are invariant within a category across instances, and then spatial invariance, which is like, if you put the object anywhere in the environment, it has the same sort of performance. So when they talk about affordances are inherently spatial. So we're always talking about something that's located in space or something that's located with respect to something else. And so for something to be spatially invariant is good because you can put it anywhere in the space and it has the same sort of meaning. It results in the same sort of performance. And then this intercategory invariance allows you to, have different shapes or different forms of that affordance and have it basically do the same thing or carry the same meaning. So we propose a method to leverage existing generalist large vision models to extract and track these affordance frames and demonstrate that our approach can learn manipulation tasks using behavior cloning from as little as 10 demonstrations with equivalent generalization to an image-based policy trained on 305 demonstrations. So they're using large vision models or using computer vision to extract frames where you have these affordances and then do this in a very sparse training environment. Okay, so that's this paper. The next paper is from Buildings, which is an MDPI journal, so they have these very obscure titles. This article is called Affordances, Architecture, and the Action Possibilities of Learning Environments, a critical review of the literature and future direction. So this is from a different area of academic research, not robotics and AI, but like in construction and architecture. So they're approaching this a little bit differently. They're approaching this more from sort of a behavioral point of view. And so the abstract here reads, this paper critically reviews the body of literature on affordances relating to the design and inhabitation of school buildings. So they're interested in affordances in school buildings and how they're designed and how people interact with those buildings. Focusing on the influence of learning spaces on pedagogical practice, we argue that links between affordances, architecture, and the action possibilities of school-based environments have largely been overlooked. So they're arguing that there needs to be a greater role for affordances in like building schools and having people do things in schools, and maybe this helps people do things that are positive. And such links hold great promise for better aligning space and pedagogy, especially amidst changing expectations about what effective teaching and learning look like. So emerging innovative learning environments, or ILEs, are designed to enable a wider pedagogical repertoire than traditional classrooms. So these are, we think about a classroom and we can improve upon that. In order to transcend stereotypical understandings about how the physical environment in schools may afford teaching and learning activities, it is becoming increasingly recognized that both design and practice reconceptualization is required for affordances of new learning environments to be effectively actualized in support of contemporary education. With a focus on the environmental perceptions of architects, educators, and learners, we believe affordance theory offers a useful framework for thinking about the design and use of learning spaces. We argue that Gibson's affordance theory, so this is affordance theory, it's something that Gibson came up with, and of course it has ties to ecological psychology, should be more commonly applied to help situate conversations between designers and users about how physical learning environments are conceived, perceived, and actioned for effective teaching and learning. All right, without going into Gibson's affordance theory, and we can put a pin in that to say, this is, relevant to affordance learning and how you might conceptualize it. Let's move on to the next paper here, which is this neural networks paper from 2024 on bio-inspired affordance learning for 6th degree of freedom robotic grasping, a transformer-based global feature encoding approach. So we're going back now to artificial intelligence and robotics. You'll see that there's a theme where we're going from like architecture to robotics. So it's like, they're kind of getting at this I'm getting at this from at least two different angles. And so what I want to do is I want to set the stage for thinking broadly about affordances and affordance learning and things like that. So this abstract reads, the sixth degree of freedom robotic grasping is a fundamental task in robot manipulation aimed at detecting graspable points and corresponding parameters in a three-dimensional space. And this is something they call affordance learning, which is, again, where this is a very operational definition of affordance learning, where this robot is trying to manipulate things in this space and has 6 degrees of freedom with which to turn things in a three-dimensional space. So, and then a robot executes grasp actions with the detected affordances. So it's like the most common or easily executable grasp actions that might align with the object or with accessible areas of the space. Existing research works on affordance learning predominantly focus on learning local features directly from each grid in a voxel scene, or each point in a point cloud scene, subsequently filtering the most promising candidate for execution. So the idea is that you have the space and you learn local features of that space, and you evaluate those features for, which areas are the best for doing a certain thing, like grasping or moving or whatever. So you can decompose that space into the best sort of trajectory, the best place to grasp something, etc. But it's, of course, a local evaluation. So that's kind of what they're getting at. Contrarily, cognitive models of grasping, and this is not cognitive models of affordance learning, but just of grasping, and there's a whole literature on kind of how we grasp things, and this is sensory motor integration, sensory motor loops, and things like that. Cognitive models of grasping highlight the significance of global descriptors, such as size, shape, and orientation in grasping. So they're focused on different things in those kind of models where they think of not just about the space, but they think about the object, the size, shape, and orientation of grasping, meaning that the object might have a handle or the object might have a place where it's easier to grasp than on other parts of the object. And so those are called global descriptors. These global descriptors indicate a grasp path closely tied to actions. So you have this grasp path, and then it's tied to the actions of the performance. Inspired by this, we proposed the novel bio-inspired neural network that explicitly incorporates global feature encoding. So they include these global features in addition to these local features that we typically use in a sort of a 6 degree of freedom model. In particular, our method utilizes a truncated sign distance function, or TSDF, as input, and employs the recently proposed transformer model to encode the global features of a scene directly. With the effective global representation, we then use deconvolution modules to decode multiple local features and generate graspable candidates. So they use local features and they also use this global representation to build this model. In addition, to integrate global and local features, we propose using a skip connection module to merge lower layer global features with higher label local features. Our approach, when tested on a recently proposed pile and packed grasping dataset for a decluttering task, surpassed state-of-the-art local feature learning methods by approximately 5% in terms of success and declutter rates. I'm not familiar with the pile and pack grasping dataset, but they have this in the paper. We also evaluate its running time and generalization ability, further demonstrating its superiority. So this is the last paper. This is end-to-end affordance learning for robotic manipulation. This is from the arXiv. This is from 2022. And so they have this figure 1 here, affordance examples of different manipulation tasks. So this is opening a door, opening a pot lid, pick and place, and dual arm push. So there are these different types of activities here, manipulation tasks, this is, so A and B are agent to object affordance maps. So you have the agent to object. So the agent is interacting with the object, and it's finding the affordance. So in this case, it's finding the handle of the lid. In this case, it's finding the opening for the door that's going on, and it's also coming out. In C, we have an agent to object, an object to object affordance map. So we have this agent to object. So it's the agent here to this object, the lock. So you have to take the lock, you have to pick the lock up, and you have to place it on the surface down here. So you have the agent picking up the object, and then the agent is taking that object and moving it to another object. And then D is the dual arm push, where you have dual agent to object affordance, where you have two agents pushing on this chair. And so that's what they're getting at here. So they have different ways that agents interact with objects through affordances, and having this affordance map where they know where the affordances are and where to engage. So the abstract here is learning to manipulate 3D objects in an interactive environment has been a challenging problem in reinforcement learning. So this is going to be a reinforcement learning approach instead of a neural network approach. In particular, it is hard to train a policy that can generalize over objects with different semantic categories, diverse shape geometry, and versatile functionality. Recently, the technique of visual affordance has shown great prospects in providing object-centric information priors with effective actionable semantics. So we have we have information priors about the object. The agent learns sort of the shape of the object, where the affordances might be, and so forth. We can encode that into a prior, and then we have these actionable semantics. So we might have semantic labels for things like a handle, or a door opening, or a lock, or some part of a chair. As such, an effective policy can be trained to open a door by knowing how to exert force on the handle. So you have to know how to open a door in order to use that affordance. And then, of course, you have to know how much force to exert, because if you see a handle and you exert the amount of force that you expect to exert, and a door doesn't open, what does that mean? Does it mean that it's locked? Or does it mean that it's a false door? Or that it means that you misinterpreted something for a handle? What does that mean? However, to learn the affordance, it is often requires human-defined action primitives, which limits the range of applicable tasks. So we only can train the model on what we know from like human studies of affordances. So we might encounter affordances in nature, or we might encounter affordances as a robot that don't behave in ways that we have descriptions for. In this study, we take advantage of visual affordance by using the contact information generated during the reinforcement learning training process to predict contact maps of interest. Such contact prediction process then leads to an end-to-end affordance learning framework that can generalize over different types of manipulation tasks. Surprisingly, the effectiveness of such frameworks holds even under the multi-stage and multi-agent scenarios. We tested our method on 8 types of manipulation tasks. Results showed that our methods outperform baseline algorithms, including visual-based affordance methods and reinforcement learning methods, by a large margin on the success rate. So this is this other robotics paper. So, so that's all I have on affordance learning. And I hope that it was wasn't meant to be an exhaustive review, but it was kind of meant to be this introduction to the concept, and to kind of think about it in terms of other types of learning, and think about it in terms of affordances and embodiment.
It reminds me of another meeting that was this week that I had forgot to mention. Buzz Robot had, which is an interesting kind of eclectic group here. in the Bay Area. I mean, they're kind of down South Bay. They had the lead developer, Remy Carden, I think, from Hugging Face, talking about Le Robot. So their Le Robot is an interesting project. So very very in line with like Neurotech X, where it's just like super affordable. It's like 3D printable devices that you can put together for like a couple hundred, and so as well as like lots of support from Hugging Face and pre-trained models and things like that. But what was interesting was something he mentioned, where it was just like there's been a real breakthrough, and he wanted to point to this particular work called Aloha. So I'll put it in. I always do Bradenburg vehicles for robotics.
Yeah.
So you'll see in Bradenburg vehicles, like there's a big Stanford robotics representation there.
Yeah.
And they quite rightfully have some really good history. I absolutely recommend The Secret History of Silicon Valley as for why did everything happen here, or not here but down south.
Yeah.
Just talking, and what Aloha's focused on is manipulation. Like in this case, it's this it's bimanual manipulation. So it's like two hands, but Remy's point was just like Aloha really changed things, and I wonder how much like if we looked at just I think it would be interesting to go and have a look at the kind of language that they're using in terms of the particular. I mean, this is one of those things where it's just like, how do roboticists, what vocabulary do roboticists use?
Yeah.
Right. And because they'll be the first to admit that there's a bunch of things that they use in a non-standard way.
Right.
but specifically about what affordances are trying to get at, like how so like how much of these papers are kind of redescribing robotics, or or like but perhaps missing, like these past researchers are absolutely thinking about affordances.
Yeah. Well.
But they're just not using the term,
Yeah.
And anyway, I think that would be really interesting. I'm meeting with a student this evening. Like, it'll be my evening, his morning, because he's in Singapore. But like this will be like I think like the third student that is interested in robot, like neural signals to control a robotic arm.
Right.
And anyway, I'm hoping, you know, like this little robot talk was the first where I was just like, hey, wow, okay, maybe we could actually have, you know, a bunch of people playing with their own arm, because this is something that we can print out ourselves, you know.
Right.
And so it was really nice, and hopefully we'll be able to say more about it once we get some oh, look, there's even a, okay, yeah. So Aloha, a low-cost open source hardware system for bimanual teleoperation with a $20,000 budget. It's capable. Yeah. So we're hoping for something that's more like 200-300.
Yeah. All right. So Jesse posted in the chat here, Janet Johnson on LinkedIn, someone who may be relevant to affordances and also technological spatial processing of affordances. She's also co-designed my human-centered AI course. And then Vidhi says, I actually have to head out. It's been great joining the meet. I've learned a lot. Looking forward to seeing you next Saturday. Thank you for joining us. And please introduce yourself in the general channel in the Slack. And if you want to introduce yourself on Neurostars, you can as well. Okay. Yes, and I'll send those papers out, or I'll make those papers available in the YouTube description, but also I'm gonna put them in the chat in Slack. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining us, and see you next week.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.